You can look at pressure forwards, tackles inside forward 50. If your team does play that way, so some of these teams just don't worry too much about tackles inside 50, but it is an important facet of a premiership team to have those small forwards applying the pressure. And we'll get to pressure acts in a second, but tackles play inside 50, GWS at the top. Then goes Melbourne, then Port Adelaide, then Sydney, then Brisbane. So those 6 teams all should make finals in 2024. They all do very well with tackles inside 50. Quite interestingly though, Collingwood and Geelong sit second last and third last. Well, Collingwood in third last, Geelong in second last. Essendon and Carlton quite low down as well. So is that important? Probably not. Pressure acts, St Kilda at the top, and then Brisbane in second last. All the other teams are pretty average. A couple more quick ones. Ball movement's a really big one. How fast you can sort of transition from defensive 50 to inside 50 through defensive chains and stuff like that. Collingwood are ranked number 1 for both their defensive half chains and scoring from defensive half chains. They're ranked number 1, so they have that stat down pat. Turnover differential, another important stat. Collingwood rank at number 3 for turnover differential. The Swans are pretty high up in 2023, as well as are the Brisbane Lions. So 2 of the grand finalists have some of the best turnover differentials. Also really good at defensive half chains are St Kilda. Ironically, they're pretty good at it. Port Adelaide are really good at it as well, who are ranked number 1. Also with the forward half chains. There are loads more. Points against is a pretty important stat. Opposition score per inside 50. Points against from turnovers. Turnover differential is a really good one, but how many points do you score from that? The chains, defensive 50 to inside 50s. How did you transition? Ball movement, another big one. The inside 50 differential, which we've already touched on in time and forward half. Now, I'm not going to bore you with more stats, but generally speaking with all of those, which you can look up on the internet, Collingwood do really well in, Brisbane do really well in, Melbourne do really well in, Carlton do pretty well in, generally speaking. Now, before we elaborate on those stats, I want to talk about injury lists. Injuries are such a major part in a team's success. The types of injuries, how long the injuries are, the length of them, the severity, the chance of the injuries recurring, and just the general, who's the player that's been injured? Are they important? Are they a depth player, a key player, etc., etc. Now, I can't find a full 2023 AFL, injury list ladder. So who had the most injuries and etc, etc. But in April 2023, which is only a couple weeks into, the season, but it's still an important stat. West Coast had the most injuries in terms of games experience. For all your players that are injured, how many games have they played, and therefore how much experience do you miss out on? The Eagles were hit hard with 1,384 games experience on the injury list. Then Sydney, then Melbourne, then Collingwood, then Carlton, all the way down to Adelaide and Brisbane, who didn't, suffer too many injuries, especially early on. Now, I do have the 2022 list. West Coast had the most injuries lost in 2022, same in 2023. The Giants had a lot. Hawthorn, Essendon, Carlton, then Geelong, North Melbourne. I'll